The old farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, stood as a relic of a different time, its sprawling acres and weathered exterior telling a story centuries in the making. In the winter of 1970, Roger and Carolyn Perron, along with their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, bought the property with dreams of a peaceful rural life. They saw the 14-room house as an opportunity, a beautiful piece of history they could call their own. At 200 acres, the land was a place for their children to run free, a far cry from the cramped city life they were leaving behind. They named it the Arnold Estate, unaware that its history was not just long, but also deeply sinister. This wasn't just a house, it was a living, breathing entity, one that had welcomed and then tormented its inhabitants for generations. And the Perron family was about to become its next victim. The haunting began subtly, almost gently. It was the kind of activity they could easily rationalize or laugh off. A broom would inexplicably move from one side of the room to the other. A stack of canned goods would tumble from a shelf in the pantry with a deafening crash, despite no one being nearby. The children reported seeing shadowy figures darting in their peripheral vision, and the girls, who were sleeping on cots in a downstairs room, felt a chilling, unseen presence tucking them into bed at night. The family at first believed it was simply the creaks and quirks of an old house. They affectionately referred to the spirits as ghosts, even giving them names. They thought of them as friendly, harmless, a charming addition to their historic home. They were wrong. The spirits were not all benevolent. Many were malevolent, and one in particular was a force of pure, undiluted malice. The atmosphere in the house shifted dramatically. What started as harmless parlor tricks soon became aggressive physical attacks. Objects were no longer just falling, they were being thrown. Beds would rise inches off the floor before crashing back down. The family would hear the terrifying sound of something scratching on the walls, and the door to the cellar, a dark, claustrophobic space that no one dared to enter, would slam shut with a thunderous bang. The most terrifying events, however, were directed at Carolyn Perron. As the matriarch of the family, she became the prime target of the most vicious entity in the house. This was the entity they would come to know as Bathsheba. According to historical research later conducted by investigators, Bathsheba Sherman was a woman who lived on the property in the 19th century and was accused of witchcraft. It was said she had sacrificed her own child to the devil and, before she died, she cursed the land and all who would dare to live on it, especially the mothers of the families who moved in. Bathsheba's hatred for Carolyn was palpable. The attacks became personal and brutal. Carolyn would wake up with strange, geometric bruises on her body, as if she had been hit with a blunt object. She felt cold, unseen hands grabbing her ankles and pulling at her hair. On one terrifying occasion, she was in the living room when a violent shove from an invisible force sent her flying from her chair, slamming her against the wall. The family witnessed this happening firsthand, their laughter replaced by horrified silence. The poltergeist activity grew so intense that a fire even broke out in a bedroom, and the beds of the children were lifted and violently shaken at night. It became clear that the Perrons were not just sharing their home with benign spirits. They were in a full-blown spiritual war for their lives. The daughters experienced their own horrors, each according to their sensitivity. Young Cindy Perron saw apparitions of a little girl named Priscilla, a spirit who claimed to have lived in the house long ago. Her sister Andrea, who would later document the full extent of the haunting, was tormented by the feeling of an icy presence pressing down on her in bed, whispering vile threats. Nancy and Christine were also tormented, their bodies becoming playgrounds for the malicious spirits. The most chilling account involved Nancy who, in one of the most frightening incidents, was possessed by an entity. The event was so traumatic that it left an indelible mark on the family, forcing them to confront the grim reality that this was not a matter of superstition, but a genuine and malevolent spiritual infestation. The family, despite the terror, was trapped. They had invested all their savings into the house and couldn't afford to move. They were forced to live with the hauntings, trying to find a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Roger Perron, the man of the house, tried to use his logic to explain away the events, but even he could not deny the escalating violence and the palpable presence of evil that permeated every corner of their home. The tipping point came when the attacks on Carolyn became life-threatening. The family knew they could no longer handle this alone. They were a family under siege, with no visible enemy and no way to fight back. Their only option was to reach out for help. And so, in their desperation, they turned to a team of paranormal investigators known for their work in cases of extreme demonic activity, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens' arrival would mark a new, terrifying chapter in the Perrons' ordeal, one that would test their faith, their family bonds, and their very sanity. The arrival of Ed and Lorraine Warren at the Arnold estate was a pivotal moment. To the Perrons, they were not just paranormal investigators. They were a beacon of hope in a nightmarish reality. The Warrens, however, arrived with a more somber understanding of the situation. They saw not a quaint haunting, but a full-blown demonic infestation. Ed, the demonologist, came armed with his Catholic faith and a professional skepticism that quickly dissolved upon entering the house. Lorraine, the clairvoyant, with her quiet, unnerving sensitivity, felt the full, cold weight of the entities that resided there, almost immediately confirming the family's greatest fears. She felt the multiple spirits, the sad and lost ones, but above all, she felt the oppressive, seething hatred of a singular, dominant entity, Bathsheba. The Warrens' investigation was meticulous. They interviewed each family member, documenting every chilling incident, from the levitating beds to the sound of disembodied whispers. Lorraine, walking through the house, could sense the tragic history layered within its walls, the suicides, the murders, the desperate lives that had ended there. But she felt Bathsheba's presence most acutely. The spirit seemed to resent the life and light the Perron family brought, and its primary focus on Carolyn was a classic sign of demonic activity, a direct assault on the matriarch, the spiritual foundation of the home. The Warrens knew this was not a simple case of a poltergeist. This was a dark entity with a powerful, malevolent will. They knew they had to confront it. The plan was a séance, a controlled attempt to communicate with the spirits and gather more information. This was a common part of their investigations, but at the Arnold estate, it would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. The séance took place one evening with the family present. As Lorraine led the session, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy and cold, the air thick with an unseen presence. The lights flickered, and the sounds of banging and scratching intensified. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened next. The spirit of Bathsheba, enraged by their intrusion, chose this moment to manifest itself in a terrifying physical way. It moved beyond simple poltergeist activity and launched a direct, violent attack. The focus of the attack was, as always, Carolyn Perron. The room erupted in chaos. The chairs began to rock on their own. A disembodied voice could be heard screaming obscenities, and then, without warning, Carolyn was seized. Her body began to contort in a way that defied human anatomy. She was lifted from her chair, and her voice was replaced by a guttural, inhuman shriek that filled the room. The screams were not her own. They were the enraged voice of the entity that had taken possession of her. The terrifying moment became a living nightmare for her daughters, who watched in horror as their mother's body was used as a vessel for pure evil. It was a sight so ghastly and so traumatizing that it remains seared into the memories of the Perron children to this day. Ed Warren, in a desperate attempt to save Carolyn, began to perform a spontaneous exorcism. He called upon God to cast the spirit out, but the attack only intensified. The house seemed to fight back, its very structure groaning under the spiritual strain. The unsanctioned exorcism, a violation of the spiritual rules of engagement, was a catalyst for more violence. It seemed to enrage Bathsheba, turning an already hostile haunting into a full-blown war. The Warrens, now fully understanding the gravity of the situation, delivered a grim verdict. They could not help the Perrons. The haunting was too deeply embedded in the land and the house itself. The only way to stop it was for the family to leave immediately. But the Perrons had nowhere to go. They had sunk their life savings into the property and were financially and emotionally drained. They were trapped, forced to make a harrowing choice: live under a constant threat of violence and torment, or face financial ruin. Roger and Carolyn, with no other option, made the heartbreaking decision to stay. The Warrens, having done what they could, left the family to their fate, their experience at the Arnold estate becoming one of their most terrifying and profound cases. The Perron family would continue to live with the malevolent presence for nearly a decade, their resilience a testament to their love for each other and a desperate hope that someday the torment would end. After the Warrens' departure, a chilling and desperate kind of normalcy settled over the Perron family. They were left to their fate, locked in a kind of silent spiritual stalemate with the entities that shared their home. The auras of the house, once merely unsettling, had become a permanent part of their lives. For nearly a decade, the family endured the constant presence of the spirits, learning to live with the unexplainable. This wasn't a period of quiet. It was an ongoing test of their resolve, a constant, low-grade terror that eroded their sense of safety and well-being. The poltergeist activity continued, though it rarely reached the terrifying heights of the seance. They heard the constant sound of heavy breathing in the hallways, the soft whispers from unseen corners, and the ghostly footsteps ascending and descending the stairs at all hours of the night. It was a home under siege, and they were forced to adapt to life on the spiritual front line. The children, in particular, bore the psychological brunt of the haunting. They were forced to grow up with the understanding that their home was not entirely their own. Each of them had their own personal tormentors and their own distinct encounters. Nancy, for instance, became fixated on a musical box that would play on its own. It became her sole source of comfort in the terrifying landscape of their home. A strange bond formed between a living child and a ghostly melody. For young April, who slept closest to the cellar door, the sounds from below were a constant, chilling reminder of the unknown terrors that lurked just out of sight. The children's vivid accounts, filled with details of their ghostly playmates and their malevolent enemies, painted a picture of a childhood spent in a surreal, haunted reality. They learned to tell the difference between the harmless spirits, like the little girl Priscilla, and the truly evil ones, like Bathsheba. This wasn't a game, it was their life. The constant torment took a profound toll on Roger and Carolyn. The weight of it all was crushing. Roger, a pragmatic and logical man, was forced to confront something that defied all reason. He spent a decade defending his family from an invisible enemy, and the exhaustion was both physical and emotional. He was the protector, but against a spirit, his strength was useless. He had to be present, vigilant, and ready to face the unknown at any moment. Carolyn, the primary target of Bathsheba, lived in a state of perpetual fear. The emotional and physical attacks left her weakened and terrified, and the memory of the possession from the seance haunted her. Her only solace was her unshakable love for her daughters and her husband, which gave her the strength to wake up every day and continue the fight. The haunting, for all its terror, also forged an unbreakable bond within the family. They were a unit against a common enemy, their shared trauma making them stronger than ever before. The financial predicament that trapped them in the house for so long was a constant source of stress. They were a working-class family who had invested everything in the property, and they couldn't simply walk away. They tried to sell the house, but the constant, bizarre occurrences made it impossible to show. No real estate agent, no matter how seasoned, could explain away the banging, the flying objects, or the terrifyingly cold spots in the rooms. So they stayed year after year, hoping that the torment would eventually subside, that the spirits would finally find peace. But Bathsheba had no interest in peace. Her aim was to destroy. The climax of the family's 10-year ordeal came in a moment of escalating violence that forced Roger to make a final, desperate decision. It was an incident that proved that the haunting was not going to stop on its own, and that their lives were truly in mortal danger. In 1980, nearly a decade after they moved in, a final act of violence broke the family's resolve. The activity had reached a new, terrifying peak. One night, Roger was in the cellar, dealing with a particularly aggressive manifestation, when he was cornered by the entity. The events that followed were so harrowing and so deeply personal that the Perron family rarely speaks about them, but it was enough to make Roger realize that he could no longer put his family at risk. The fear of what Bathsheba would do next was greater than the fear of financial ruin. They couldn't stay a day longer. They gathered what belongings they could, left the vast majority of their possessions behind, and left the Arnold estate for good. Their escape was not a victory. It was a desperate, panicked retreat from a place that would never truly be their home. The family drove away in the dead of night, leaving the house to the spirits and to its grim history. The Perrons never returned. The memories of their time in the house would haunt them for the rest of their lives. It was a private trauma that they lived with for years, their story remaining in the shadows until Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, began to write a series of books documenting their experiences. It was through her writings that the world finally learned the full, terrifying truth of the Arnold estate. Her story, raw and unfiltered, became the basis for the film The Conjuring, a cinematic dramatization that, while frightening in its own right, only scratched the surface of the real-life ordeal the family endured. The legacy of the Perron family is a testament to the unexplainable, to the reality of a world that exists just beyond our perception. Their story is not just a ghost story. It is a profound narrative of a family's love and resilience in the face of an incomprehensible evil. They did not defeat the evil in their home, but they survived it. They escaped and found a way to move on, carrying their memories and their bond with them. The Arnold estate remains a quiet, sprawling monument to a horror that was all too real. And the Perron family, now scattered but forever connected by their shared past, lives on, a living testament to the fact that some of the greatest battles are fought not with swords and shields, but with courage, faith, and the enduring power of family. To truly conclude the story of the Perron family, we must step back from the raw terror of their ordeal and look at it not as a sequence of events, but as a profound philosophical text. The Arnold estate was more than a haunted house. It was a stage where the most fundamental questions of existence were acted out. The story is a chilling meditation on the nature of evil, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring power of memory and place. It asks us to consider whether evil is a tangible force, a literal entity with a malevolent will, or a psychological manifestation of trauma and history. In the case of Bathsheba, the answer seems to be both. She was a historical figure, a woman accused of a monstrous crime, but her evil became something more. It became a spiritual parasite that fed on the life and love of the Perron family, seeking to corrupt the very light they brought into that dark house. Her existence blurred the lines between history and haunting, between the past and the present, challenging us to accept that some wounds are so deep they bleed across generations. The house itself is a central character in this philosophical drama. It wasn't just a container for the horror, it was the horror. The Arnold estate had a consciousness of its own, a dark sentience born from centuries of pain and suffering. It was a physical record of every tragedy that had occurred within its walls. The suicides, the murders, the quiet despairs, all had left an indelible mark on its very structure, on the air itself. It became a liminal space, a place where the veil between our world and the next was unnervingly thin. The Perron family did not just move into a house, they moved into a living, breathing graveyard. This challenges our very concept of home. We see a house as a sanctuary, a place of safety and warmth. But what happens when the sanctuary is the source of the danger? The Perron story forces us to grapple with the idea that our physical spaces are not neutral. They are imbued with the energy of the lives lived within them. The journey of the Perron family is a powerful allegory for the human condition. They were not fighting an enemy they could see or understand. They were battling the unseen, the illogical, and the inexplicable. This mirrors our own existential struggles against forces we cannot control: illness, loss, the randomness of fate. In a world obsessed with reason and scientific explanation, the Perron story reminds us that there are still things that defy logic. It's a terrifying but also liberating thought. It suggests that our world is richer and stranger than we can ever fully comprehend. Their decade of torment was a trial by fire, a forced confrontation with a darkness that sought to consume them. But in the face of this all-encompassing evil, their collective love and unbreakable bond became their most potent weapon. They survived not by defeating the darkness, but by refusing to let it extinguish their own light. This makes their tale a testament to human resilience and the power of family love as a shield against the most profound evil. The transformation of their lived trauma into a public story, through books and a major Hollywood film, adds another philosophical layer. Their suffering became a piece of entertainment, a spectacle for a global audience. This raises questions about the ethics of storytelling and our collective fascination with horror. We consume these narratives not just for the thrill, but because they allow us to safely explore our deepest fears about death, the afterlife, and the fragility of our own sanity. The story of the Perrons is both a personal tragedy and a shared cultural myth. The movie The Conjuring may have dramatized their experiences, but it also gave a voice to their decade of silent agony. It took their singular, terrifying ordeal and made it a communal one, allowing millions to feel a fraction of their fear. This process transforms a personal truth into a collective belief. In the end, the story of the Perron family is not really about ghosts or demons. It's about a family's unwavering commitment to one another. The final, heartbreaking moment of their story, the escape in the middle of the night, is not a moment of defeat. It is, in fact, the ultimate philosophical victory. They did not conquer the house, but they chose life over property, family over financial ruin, and hope over despair. They walked away from a place of death and into an uncertain future, but they did so together. They left the house to its ghosts, but they took their souls with them. Their tale reminds us that we are more than the spaces we inhabit, more than the traumas we endure. We are defined by our ability to endure, to love, and to carry on. The Arnold estate may forever be a place of haunting, but the Perron family's story is a timeless echo of survival, a final, profound testament to the idea that no matter how deep the darkness, the human spirit, filled with love, will always find a way to escape.